Hello, everyone. This is Ian Williams, President of the Foreign Press Association and member of the Overseas Press Club, whose former president, Bill Holstein, is here and is my co-host for the occasion, since both of us have had a long interest in Hong Kong and China. In fact, Bill and I were on an OPC press trip to Hong Kong the year before the handover of saintly memory.
We went twice, once in 95 and 96.
We went for a before and after session on it, which was fascinating. We also went to, I keep calling it Canton, I'm so old, but Guangdong, and at the same time, and watched Shenzhen as it was being impregnated, you might say. It was just a born then. It was a glint in Deng Xiaoping's eye, pretty much. Right. But things have changed since then. So we're here because, above all, under cover of the fracas in Washington, many things are happening all over the world because between COVID and President Trump's attempt to hang on to power, attention has been diverted. And Hong Kong, the Chinese authorities and the local surrogates have taken extreme steps which haven't really had the attention that they deserve, should have had and would have had. So we suspect that this is probably calculated, that people are doing things that they wouldn't be able to get away with normally. Amongst that has been the legislature has, legislators have been dismissed, elected legislators have been dismissed for alleged breaches of the new national security law. And we should put on record that we did approach several of them who were very cooperative, but didn't appear, refused to appear on the grounds that if they appeared on our press conference, they would be possibly guilty of colluding with foreign powers and end up in jail, which is a very real prospect for all of them. Somewhat bolder, because he's not a politician and I hope isn't going to weasel his words either, is Chris Yeung, who's the chairman of the Hong Kong Journalists Association and has been one of those battling for freedom of the press and the type of freedoms of information that we used to expect from Hong Kong. And Chris will describe the situation, what it's like for journalists in Hong Kong, what the threats are for them, and then we will throw it open. We've already had some questions in, for the very nature of our discourse with we're scared of Zoom bombing and other things. Any questions that come in will be on the Q&A session and we will relay them to our speakers. Bill and I will chip in with our own questions and interpretations of these. So Chris, what's it like for the Hong Kong Press Association and Journalists Association at the moment? Are you under siege or are you proceeding as normal?
Well, pretend to be normal. And thank you, Ian, Bill, and good morning or evening, fellow media friends there. And my pleasure to speak to you today. Briefly, I'm a journalist covering Hong Kong politics for almost 30-something years. And currently, I'm chief writer of an online media. I have worked for South China Morning Post for 25 years. And as Ian said, I'm currently the elected chairman of the Journalists Association, an independent journalist trade body. So I'm happy to answer questions about the media, politics, and other questions that you may be interested in. Perhaps before talking about the association, let me talk briefly about the bigger picture of the situation in Hong Kong. I think that helps us know what happened to the media and perhaps the whole society. It's been 23-something years since 1997, when we have the one country, two systems, being implemented. And now, basically, the question is there really one country, two systems? The balance between one country, two systems has been, say, heavily shifted now towards one country, not the two systems, and to the Communist Party, the country is the party is the equivalent of the country, the state. So perhaps it's one party, one system now in the situation in Hong Kong. Particular since the Umbrella Revolution in 2014, and then last year's anti-extradition bill protests, which turned into a social movement. Both had been blamed by the Communist Party as color revolution with foreign forces behind. So that led to what happened in Hong Kong in the past, well, maybe 2020, particularly in the past half a year or so, that basically the ruling party ran out of tolerance and patience in Hong Kong and decided to basically effectively rewrite the basic law, impose a new law on national security, impose new political rules that result in the, disqualification of elected Democrat legislators, and now trying to what they see as to rebuild, to build a new order in Hong Kong, which they believe will end the political social turmoil. Then rebuilding, say, social order in Hong Kong. They know that it will be a painful process, but they are ready to pay, well, even a high price for that. In the new law, national security and the political rules or order that I just mentioned talk a lot about national security, patriotism. Last week, a pretty senior Chinese official in charge of Hong Kong affairs make a remark saying that before freedom, liberty, democracy should be patriotism. Love your country. That's the core that he sees as the number one core values of the Hong Kong society. The Communist government and the Hong Kong government say they will still allow opposition voices, but their criticism has a bottom line, that is patriotism, love country. So you shouldn't go to Western countries to suggest sanctions against your country. The Democrats can still be an opposition, but what they call only as a loyal opposition. So that's the brief bigger picture that I want to mention before I go into the media, because that will be, and that is, and perhaps will be the environment for the media to operate, or to say bluntly, to survive, to find room for survival under such a deplorable and difficult environment. Yes, the government still say publicly, or well, perhaps like the communist China, there's free press, freedom of the press here, there's right to reporting here, but the room for free speech, free and independent media is shrinking in light of China's hardened approach towards Hong Kong. The society in the past few months now still we all feel an air of fear is engulfing the society across various sectors, teachers, academics, and campus, university campus, particularly following the enactment of the national security law, For obvious reasons, I think as some of you may know, in the law itself, there are provisions outlawing, say, threats or what they see as threats to national security, which are quite broad and vaguely defined. And for journalists, there's always a lingering danger and fear that what they write, what they publish, may violate the law because of the content, because of the persons they talk, to, or even for the pictures that they publish. To cite an example, you may have heard about the slogan, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times."
Mm-hmm.
That 8 Chinese character slogan has been branded by the Hong Kong government as a subversive slogan. So I understand that even book publishers tell writers not to publish pictures of the slogan on the books. Otherwise, those who print it could be, say, liable to offenses in the national security law. So that's the fear prevailing among the media. For the past 4 months, basically, of all the national security cases, I should say not one of them is directly related to press reports. Of course, there's a case of Jimmy Lai, founder and chairman of the Nix Media Group. But the case involved activities of Jimmy Lai himself, a charity fund under the group, and no, not directly to stories, say, published by the Nix Media. That does not mean journalists are not worried. Actually, the opposite is true. I think one major reason is that it's been 4 months after the national security law was implemented. It's quite clear that the law has been implemented in a rigorous, aggressive manner. So the opposite of a paper tiger now is a real tiger, a pretty scary tiger. So we've seen cases of different kinds. We've seen a case of national security officers investigating at Chinese university campus just yesterday on a rally organized by students, by university students who chant also slogans like "Liberate Hong Kong." It's quite controversial because in Hong Kong, universities have operate on an autonomous manner. So basically, police cannot enter universities only upon requests for assistance from university management. But this time, the university itself made a call for police investigation. So that's also a controversial part. So it's partly, in a great part, because of the way national security has been implemented, quite aggressively and rigorously, that media organizations journalists are in particular worried that sooner or later media will be the target. And our fears are not unfounded because there are public statements made by people, including Chief Executive Carrie Lam, who said media is one of the sectors that she said should be rectified. should be rectified. The other sectors are teachers and civil service. So we have already seen teachers being disqualified, being deregistered, and civil servants, new recruit civil servants, are required to sign a declaration in support of the Basic Law and the Hong Kong SAR. So it's seen as a kind of a political vetting. So and in the national security law, there's also an article that say they will step up regulation and supervision of the media. No details, but we are expecting. We are expecting that the government will tighten control and regulation over media.
So when
can you hear me well?
yes.
Yeah, I'll just finish it. It's a pretty gloomy picture. I would say one positive sign is that journalists are still quite resilient here, and there's still strong support, society support for free and independent press. And so we know that some journalists have already migrated or plan to migrate, but the overall fleet of journalists is still in relatively good shape here. Obviously, the mood, the spirit, the mood, perhaps, the sentiments are quite bad. I would say the worst time for many decades. But we know that we have to stand firm and speak out and get society support to defend our rights and freedoms. I'll finish here, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Chris, what are the mechanisms that you see being used by the Hong Kong government to bring pressure? I know the Western press there is worried about accreditation being imposed. Are you experiencing any kind of official actions to make lists of journalists? How is pressure being manifested on a day-to-day basis?
Well, police, in particular, police is quite keen to have some form of accreditation for journalists covering, say, protests, citing concerns about, say, what they call fake journalists, and doing, say, unlawful things in public rallies. But we see that as a step towards tightening control over the media, particularly for those they consider as unfriendly or hostile, critical towards the police, and they have received support from Beijing political parties and legislators who are quite conservative and diehard and in a sense anti-free media. They blame media for this kind of a social discontent, political rebellious protesters in society. They blame the media for adding oil to the fire. And in Hong Kong, I think maybe like many other societies, journalists tend to be liberal. I mean, they believe in liberal values, democracy, free society, free speech, all these things, and that clash with those who are loyal to the Communist Party, who believe in control, order, and patriotism, and can compromise and compromise. So so naturally they are not happy with a lot of the media, and for those who are owned by, say, business people, and they put pressure on them behind the scene, and through them they put the right person.
Your advertising gets affected.
Advertising for Apple Daily, I think for more than 10 years, they face boycott from not just China-funded enterprises, but almost all major listed companies here, particularly those in property businesses, who are even more, say,
the red billionaires, you call them.
Yeah, those are, yeah.
So the government's hand isn't officially on these maneuvers. It's unseen. People will rush to do their bidding quietly without it being announced.
Well, Chris, is it the hand of the Hong Kong government only that you feel, or is Xinhua or the liaison office, are mainland interests involved in beginning to put pressure on the Hong Kong media?
The liaison office here, the central government's liaison office here has become more and more active, behind, not just behind the scene, but are more, say, ready to speak in public, and making clear their policies, and we know that it's open secret anyway, that they have been, say, talking directly to politicians, to legislators from the pro-Beijing camp, on what they should do and what's on their agenda. So that includes fighting the battle, the opinion battle, seizing the control over media. So on one hand, they mobilize, they spend a lot of resources for their own media, to grab for airtime space on social media, and on the other hand, they attack independent media. They attack our association, which we are quite vocal in opposing police brutality and lack of accountability in the operation in the last 18 months. So obviously we become a target. And we have been labeled as a political body, which is not. We are a trade union, and we basically we only speak on media and press issues, not on, say, political issues.
Dory Joan Jiang is asking some questions somewhat related. Will you get into trouble for saying liberate Hong Kong the way you did just now, even if you're reporting other people?
Well, I don't have an answer, to be honest. But I can't just I wouldn't shy away from I think just telling the fact. I think the fact is that the police, that the government has labeled this slogan as subversive. I think that's a fact, and I don't think I am promoting it or advocating for any kind. I guess I said that, I made that clear enough, and if that lands me into trouble, and well, so be it, I guess.
Remember, in 1984, thought crime was thinking a thought. It wasn't necessarily believing it; it was thinking it was bad enough.
Dory, by the way, Dory asked that question, was based in Hong Kong for many years for Business Week, and I was her editor for part of that time.
Don't
One of the things the Western Press Corps is concerned about, Chris and Ian, is that the Hong Kong media will be targeted, and then on the basis of trying to break the independence of the Hong Kong media, then they'll come for the Western media there. Hong Kong is a major outpost for major Western news organizations. What are the connections you see, if any, between Hong Kong government's strategies toward the Hong Kong media versus the Western media there?
The issue of foreign media has been made complicated by Trump's Cold War with China, and that the Hong Kong-based foreign media has also been made a victim in this kind of political game between Washington and Beijing. So they start the tit for tat for journalists on both sides. And then later, they have already kicked out some American journalists out from China. So the target was shift to Hong Kong. And I think earlier this year, and the mainland's media or propaganda machine, or even including some in Hong Kong, have suggested that the Chinese government should penalize American journalists here as a tit for tat for what President Trump has done to the mainland journalists based in U.S. So I think the China-U.S. factor, how that factor plays out in the next administration will be one factor, but still, I think the bigger picture, I would say, is that China has taken a more suspicious and perhaps a hostile worldview and will towards the West, not just U.S. but EU, UK, Australia.
Having big troubles with Australia.
Yeah, Australia, and I don't see that will change within a short period of time, I guess. 2022, I guess Xi Jinping is likely to be again elected. So in the next 2 years, Xi will have to hold on to power, and if he holds on to power for even longer, I think the analysis is that we won't see drastic change of policy or strategy. Maybe just some fine tuning or a more skillful and soft and on some issues, trade and perhaps journalists, but on political issues or sometimes issues like media or trade can become political. I mean, so my own feeling is that not just for the local media but the foreign media here will have to brace for a difficult time in a period of time, maybe a matter of years, I guess. In the next 2 or 3 years, we don't see optimism, I guess. So for foreign media, my feeling is that you may know better than I do. Their own assessment here is also not pessimistic. So the trend is to relocate, if possible, keep a workable presence here.
But what about you have the media, and if remember, it started a long time ago. It's not just the local red billionaires. Rupert Murdoch withdrew Chris Patton's memoirs because he wanted to engage in business with the mainland. Are the rest of the foreign media sort of holding the line, or the foreign-owned media, are they prepared to accommodate themselves to the regime to secure business advantages?
I guess I think up to a point, and also just my own guess. I think those foreign media here will also be subjected to the influence of their own governments. I mean, they have to, they cannot compromise excessively on issues, like press freedom. So I guess walking on thin ice for foreign media here, because they could also I was told that the foreign ministry's office here is quite active. It's quite active, like the foreign ministry in Beijing. They have been, I think, talking, say, to foreign journalists here when they think their stories are that they think their stories are biased or incorrect. But I guess it's a game that I think
that's very interesting. The Chinese Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong is talking to Hong Kong-based journalists, Western journalists, about their coverage. That's very interesting.
That's my understanding. That's my understanding. But of course, for obvious reasons, those journalists would like to keep it quiet, handle it quietly, not necessarily making concessions, but might not be good for publicity. I mean,
off the record, to use that. So, what about accreditation for journalists? I mean, are there official accreditations for Hong Kong journalists, or does your association, Hong Kong Police, or who?
Well, Hong Kong is quite a free place. It's quite free. There's no strict entry, say, threshold for journalists or for media working here. In fact, during the protests last year, many foreign news media or journalists just flew in, and then they went straight to the protest sites and do stories and do live coverage. And but then now the government is tightening control, and they start with saying that when police cordon off, say, areas in public places, in public rallies, journalists who are not on a list, on the list of the government, on the registered list of the government, will not be able to do reporting in those areas. In public places, okay, but when they are cordoned off, restricted to the press, only those who register with our information services department are defined as the press. So it's a step towards more restriction. We see that as a step towards more restrictions and control. There's always been suggestions for an official accreditation system, particular from, pro-Beijing, say, groups, and even for some, say, conservative, say, journalists, but they are in a minority. But the problem is now it's getting more and more difficult to analyze or to analyze or to make a sensible guess on what the government may do. The track record has become almost irrelevant. On some occasion, we are not even quite sure whether it is the Hong Kong government who makes the decisions, or the central government's liaison office here is making the decisions. And whether there's anyone behind the Hong Kong police in their operation, a lot of these questions are still unanswered. And because because of what they have done is quite different from the government we know. And so something might have changed, that it will take a bit more time for us to get a hand of what happened behind the scene.
Chris, I don't
So
want to be accused. I don't want to
sure.
be accused of interfering in the sacred motherland, the internal security of the sacred motherland. But what can we as journalists do about this climate and safeguard media freedom in Hong Kong for both local journalists and foreign journalists? What is there anything we can do? Can you imagine anything that would be effective?
I have always say Hong Kong. Well, I think this statement may be controversial, because exactly an academic has made this statement, and that has been misinterpreted as subversive. That statement was, Hong Kong belongs to the world. Hong Kong belongs to the world. And that statement was or maybe twisted as separatists. And I think Hong Kong belongs to the world. To me, that Hong Kong is international, right? Part of the international, part of the world, and nothing about sovereignty, nothing about territorial, say, integrity. But unfortunately, that statement was misrepresented. But still, I think I and many others, journalists or other people, fellow Hong Kong citizens, well, that's also what Hong Kong government said. Hong Kong is an international city, so the international community needs to know what happened in Hong Kong, and why that happened.
Has touched on this point. He makes the point that the global financial capitals depend upon an effective rule of law and also a free flow of information. So,
exactly.
Have the Chinese decided that Hong Kong is, as a global financial capital, is dispensable, with Shenzhen and Shanghai building up, so that they don't have to worry about that aspect, what the effect of a clampdown on freedom of information or the rule of law means for financial flows?
Well, it's difficult to explain their decision, because for obvious reasons, what they have done has caused damage, well, anxieties, if not damage, to Hong Kong's international image and status as a financial city. And perhaps their own assessment is that, like Shanghai or perhaps Beijing, and they don't have, they don't even have, perhaps not the rule of law that we know, free press that we know, but still there's a lot of foreign investors, big companies coming, looking for opportunities and making investment there. So they may have thought that Hong Kong, will be okay, or yes, there will be short-term pain, but in the long run, with a strong, say, mainland China behind, Hong Kong will be okay. But unfortunately, I think I would say a lot of people here, particularly those middle class or professionals or educated people, are worried that once those things are destroyed, lost, you never get it back. You never get it back. And yeah, there's a pretty big gap of understanding between Hong Kong people and the Chinese government. But back to Bill's question, I guess what I have been doing is yes, is to tell people who are interested in Hong Kong, who follow Hong Kong, who like to know what happened in Hong Kong, to tell Hong Kong as I see it, honestly and frankly, and well, difficult to tell whether that could land me into trouble, but you end up doing nothing if you keep second guessing. I mean,
Frank Gomez has touched on this to some extent, but I'm going to phrase this very, very carefully. Have you, I mean, how much moral support, I'm sure, not physical or political or whatever, how much moral support have you had from overseas press organizations for your position there? You know, obviously getting support from foreign organizations is a go straight to jail, do not collect $200. God. So, have you had at least moral support and a moral uplift from other organizations backing you?
Well, I always believe that it's important for the world to watch closely what happened in Hong Kong, not just the press, but overall free speech and basic rule of law, independent judiciary. I think those are fundamental things that make Hong Kong a success. And I would say I see no reasons why the central government might have different assessment on the situation in Hong Kong for the time being, a very different assessment perhaps. But I don't think I don't believe in conspiracy theory that that say perhaps some other cities in China may want to see Hong Kong on a downtrend or in decline. I don't believe in that conspiracy theory. I mean, Hong Kong is still important. It's still important to China, and even though there's a lot of talk about the depreciating importance of Hong Kong in view of the rise of Shenzhen or Shanghai, a lot of hot air, but you can see Hong Kong still play a role for them, for big enterprises coming here to our stock market to list here. So not to mention there's still a political significance, I mean, of Hong Kong.
Chris, I've been surprised that the Hong Kong government, there's not been a single resignation. Martin Lee has pointed this out. Everyone in the Hong Kong government has gone along with the new order, the new era. And so, but earlier you mentioned that Hong Kong society has not necessarily fallen for that there are still elements of Hong Kong society that appreciate freedom of speech, freedom of press, and that it's still, not everyone in Hong Kong has fallen into line to obey Beijing. It sounds like there's still some hint of democracy there.
I think there's no doubt about that. And the last 18 months, we've seen another awakening of the society, awakening of the society, of the vital importance of basic things: justice, fairness, accountability, and those things are the important things of the whole movement. When, say, police officers act unlawfully, and people want an independent investigation, and that's only fair, and a justice needed.
That's not just a Hong Kong demand, is it?
Yeah, I guess that's universal in the sense that for those who have powers and they have abused their power, it's just fair that you have to have a fair response from those in power. And if you cannot do it because of the system, then you have to do something with the system, the election system, and all these things. So and then we see young people and caring about the society coming out to say what they believe in. And yes, that caused concerns, fears in Beijing. But I think to a lot of people here, they are positive of healthy signs that young people care about the place they live, and want it to be a place with, say, basic things like freedom and justice.
One of the key differences between Hong Kong and China at the moment is that Hong Kong is outside the great Chinese internet wall. Are there any indications?
Still there. I think still the kind of internet control or flow of information, we still have quite free access here. Across the border, yeah, there's still a firewall. I mean, we don't know. It's difficult to tell on whether there will be control over internet. There have been speculations that control over internet will come sometime, but not for the time being. One uncertainty, of course, is now that we have a legislature which does not have any, almost no, say, democratic legislators. So that means the government can enact any laws that they want to, not even have voices of opposition. So whether, say, the government will just impose controls or new laws that control or that handle fake news or internet control, we honestly don't know. The feeling is that anything can happen. Anything can happen. So really difficult to tell. But of course, there are clear downsides if they if they impose control like those on internet, like those in China. That makes, yes, Hong Kong like China, I think another big step. Yeah.
Chris, we were talking before we went live about Joshua Wong, and he's going to be sentenced next week, and two others, and you predict that they'll get hard jail time. And what impact does that have on the overall tone in Hong Kong?
It does not come as a surprise because it's a case that it's difficult for them to defend what they had done on that occasion. So from the legal point of view, it's a very difficult case to argue. So I think that is perhaps why they admit charge in return for a more lenient, say, sentence. The kind of I would say both substantive and psychological effect, because they are still important, say, young leaders in the social in the movement, and so that so the whole fleet will be weakened, the force will be weakened, and then the perhaps a more damaging impact is on the morale, I would say, the sentiments of the pro-democracy camp in Hong Kong, not just those who are activists, but supporters. It will be demoralizing, no doubt, because they are too young, I think 20 plus, too young, and then for a lot of supporters, they feel sorry that they have to take the burden of doing the right thing, but seen as the wrong thing by the authorities. So I think that feeling of injustice will prevail. But then under the present atmosphere, the environment, it's getting more and more difficult and in fact dangerous to take to the streets. So you can imagine that that suppressed, discontent, frustrations, and feelings of injustice will be in the society, and that, to be honest, I think is an element of instability, and you never know whether with another sparkle and the fire will there will be another big fire, another, say, political unrest. But of course, it's really hard to tell at the moment. But what I can see is that it's a bit similar to the umbrella revolution, umbrella movement in 2014, and some activists have been taken to court, and then one after another, they have been sentenced. They serve jail terms. So that cause that's quite damage to the morale of the pro-democracy force here. So I imagine that people will react differently. Some will just give up and migrate it. Some, well, perhaps some more will maybe try to keep calm and wait, and knowing that it's counterproductive, say, to to stage, say, protests under the present environment. and for others, for some others may just well, don't want to get involved with all these protesters. So it's difficult in testing time for a lot
One
of
thing
people.
I might suggest.
We're going to have to start winding up now. So if you could make your concluding remarks.
Oh, well,
Ian, I'd like to ask Chris
yeah,
to provide
sure.
his email so that all of us can email him and he can keep us informed about what's going on. I think that would be a useful thing.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll do that in the email. Actually, I guess Ian should have my email.
Are you on the chat? I've got it, but we could put it on the chat thing for people.
Yeah.
We could also send it out for messages of solidarity. I think we should perhaps send out an email on the Hong Kong press.
Okay, I'll send it. I'll send it to via the email to you, and you just send it to whoever who want to get in touch with me. Yeah.
No, we're happy to. It was Martin Lee who put us in touch with you to begin with, because he's waiting jail times as well. I mean, there's a lot of jail time waiting around. It's very upsetting. So this is Ian Williams from the Foreign Press Association and a member of the Overseas Press Club, whose former president, Bill Holstein, has been speaking here on it. We've been talking to Chris Yeung, who is the chairman of the Hong Kong Journalists Association. And we're talking about it's incumbent upon the rest of the world's journalists. If Hong Kong journalists and legislators can't talk about their plight because of the threat of imprisonment, then those of us that don't have this threat, it's even more incumbent upon us to make sure that this situation is kept under close scrutiny by the rest of the world, particularly the incoming administrations here and the administrations in Europe and the other places that do business with Beijing. So I'd like to thank you, Chris. Thank you for your courage, and
you're welcome.
hope that nothing you've said offends the very tender sensibilities of the cadres in Beijing.
Well, yeah, it shouldn't take too long to know.
I can't hear them knocking on the door.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
I should make it. It is 11 o'clock at night with Chris, so he's he stayed up late to talk to us. So once again, thank you very much from the Foreign Press.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, nice talking to you.
And
okay,
see you at the next one, I hope.
Good night.
We do have, in fact, I should make an announcement now. I've just arranged this morning, I haven't got the date yet, but Kishore Mahbubani, the former Singapore diplomat who has written a book about the position of China versus the US, will be one of our guests in the near future. Talking about his book is basically, has China won? Which is a very relevant question under these circumstances, perhaps. We'll get that answered. We'll send you the details of that as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.